when you're getting married, it's just the beginning, and there is going to be a healthy sense of, a little bit of nervousness and fear, but you should not have any doubt about who that person is, their character, their values, and the fact that that's the person that you want to go through the challenges of life with.
Hello and welcome to the Overflow Podcast. This is a podcast on a mission to discover how you and I can live a life of abundance, full to overflowing. In Season 5, we're learning how to cultivate thriving relationships and how, through the good times and the bad, we can maintain the overflow. This is episode 38. My name is Carl Lindsay, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Philip Milosavljevic.
Carl, what's up, buddy?
Another episode of relationship season.
Well, Carl, I'm excited about this episode, but before we get there, I want to ask you a question, okay?
All right.
What is your favorite place that you've lived in your life? You've kind of been an international guy and stuff. Yeah. And what kind of people did you meet there that you really enjoyed? Kind of the relationships that you had that were the most meaningful? I guess that could be two questions.
Yeah, it is. I think because I like places for different reasons. When I visited Oregon for the first time in 2010 on a family vacation, I was like, we went to 10 different states and a bit in Canada too. But that was the favorite place I visited that trip. And then I found myself living there 6 years later. So that was really interesting and then I just lived there for 3 years and it was amazing. I really liked the nature. The Pacific Northwest is beautiful, but more than that, it was just the vibe, if I can say it like that. But then another one of my favorite places was Africa, or in general, because I've lived in Zambia and Kenya. So I shouldn't say Africa as a whole, but just living over there, just hanging out with the people was really. I lived in a mud brick home for 2 months out in a little village. And it was wonderful. Like, I was lonely, to be honest. Yeah. But still at the same time, the people hanging out there and doing meaningful work was really valuable. So yeah, it was good.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So for me, I would say the most meaningful place I ever visited was Nepal.
Because you lived there for how long?
We were there for 3 months.
Okay.
And it was absolutely spectacular in the culture. It was rich in that sense. Very poor country itself, but absolutely culturally rich.
Yeah.
It's very distinct from anything I had ever experienced before. Now, my own country, there are villages and there's poverty and stuff, but there was a level of poverty that I hadn't seen before. Kids living on the river, shack, nothing there.
Yeah.
They're bathing in the water that just 100 feet up above was the, I guess you could say, the ceremonial crematory.
Yeah.
And they would throw the ashes in the water, and they're like just a few hundred yards down. There's a family jumping in the water, playing there. They drink, so wow. But then we also did the base camp to Everest trek. That was spectacular. So that was really meaningful. But I think my greatest joy was also just doing mission trips overseas, and just realizing how incredibly lovely human beings are that don't always have as much in terms of monetary privilege or resource privilege, but yet are just so giving of whatever they have, and I find myself being like, why am I so selfish?
Yeah.
Why am I so stingy? Like, honestly, what in the world is going on here? It isn't until I go overseas that then I just recognize that in myself. So when I think about relationships, I think analyzing them from different cultures is also very important, and different places around the world and how they go about relationships. So this is going to be a good episode.
Well, we are exploring healthy relationships this season, and this is the third episode in this series. The topics for each episode are going to take us on a journey from singleness to marriage and some of the things that come up along the way on that journey. Our own lives and experience rarely reflect the seemingly perfect narratives we see in the movies. We talked about this last week, and so we really need the wisdom of others to act as our guide along this path. And so, yeah, we've got some great guides lined up for you this season. And we hope the content is helpful no matter what stage you find yourself in, whether you're single, whether you're dating, engaged, or married, all the topics we're going to be talking about can be helpful. You can find things to apply into your own relationship. In the last 2 episodes, we talked about the need to understand our attachment styles and why it's so important to relate to ourselves in a healthy way before diving headfirst into a relationship. But Ranela talked about last week the idea of this catch-22, where sometimes we need to learn while we're in a relationship. But let's assume we have done some of the hard work. We're back with Ranela Kaligithi.
Yeah, you got it.
There we go. Again this week to talk about what to look for when you feel you are ready for a relationship. So yeah, welcome back to the show, Ranela.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
This is awesome. Well, if you're just catching this episode and you haven't listened to the last one, I encourage you to go back, listen to that one, then jump in this one. But for the time being, just let me introduce who Ranela is. She is a mental health coach and therapist in training at the California Baptist University. She's passionate about helping others redefine their relationships to themselves and others and live more meaningful and fulfilled lives. Her self-care routine involves spending time with family, writing, reading, working out, and eating as much ice cream as she wants.
Amen.
That's pretty good. Kind of jealous.
And I would say one of her other hobbies is laughing and smiling.
Aw.
She has just an exuberant, drawing personality to her. So I'm sure your clients probably really enjoy spending time with you.
Yeah, we love it.
That's great. So you've got clients who you're working with just on a mental health basis, is that right?
Yeah, it's a lot of developing a strong sense of self-awareness. We talk about faith in relationships as well, but it's a lot of mental health and how faith integrates with that too.
Yeah, and you're on a journey to become a LMFT, like you said, therapist in training. Yeah.
Hey, talk to me about just faith in relationships just for a moment. I just kind of want to probe that.
Faith in mental wellness or faith in relationships?
Faith in relationships and even mental wellness. We can go into that too. But what hits you when you think about faith in relationships? That would be interesting from your experience, what you've explored with people.
Yeah, faith is a huge part of any relationship. And I tend to say spirituality because spirituality looks different for each person, but that's a huge value that each person has. Even an atheist has their own spirituality. So it's important to find someone with the same values of faith and spirituality as you, whether that's the absence of it or whatever that looks like lived out in your life. But yeah, it's a huge part of any relationship, whether it looks traditional, like going to church or whatever, Christian, or if it looks totally different, like how you treat humans and how you believe, those are all part of your spiritual values. Yeah.
Now, what if those are mismatched? I mean, what have you experienced or what have you seen and read?
Yeah. I think that takes time to figure out, who that person is and what it looks like in their day-to-day lives. And if they're mismatched, then, of course, a conversation ensues and you have to figure out for yourself what, and that's why I go back to listening to the previous podcast, because you have to know who you are and what values matter to you the most. Because at the end of the day, people really struggle with mismatched values, and faith is part of those values. And so you have to figure out, am I okay with this person having a different value when it comes to their spirituality or faith? And you have to know for yourself what you really believe and what really matters to you. Because if you don't, it's easy to just kind of give it up because you like the person so much.
Yeah.
Ooh,
but that's not gonna.
So that really indicates that faith element wasn't as high of a value as everyone else maybe around you would have assumed or whatnot, if you were willing to compromise it for the sake of the relationship.
Right. Or it could be that in that moment, because you have a weak sense of self, you're more willing to give up who you are for the moment because you see someone who maybe could fulfill something in you that you're not willing to lose.
Wow.
But later on down the road, you eventually continue to develop as a person. And you may come back to that sense of those values that you had, and they're still not there because that was never who they were.
Right.
And so like the first thing is, do you have a strong sense of self? And yeah, that helps so many things.
Wow. Wow.
That's good.
Wow.
Well, the reality is and you've kind of just highlighted it, that there is no perfect relationship. It's messy, unpredictable, and both people are bound to get hurt at some point. We see that all the time. So if that's the case, why even pursue a relationship? That's the big question.
And that's such an interesting question to me, because as humans, it's so part of the fabric of our being to want to be in a relationship. That's part of what it means to be human. But if you're seriously considering that question and you're genuinely asking, what's the point? Should I even pursue this? Like, why even be in a relationship? I would say 9 times out of 10, you probably came from a home where you didn't witness a good relationship.
Right.
If you're asking that question,
you've seen too much mess.
Yeah, because even people who came from quote unquote good homes, whatever that looks like, of course, there are moments in time where you're like, oh, this is too much work. Maybe you just went through a breakup. You're like, oh, I never want to get married again. Of course, we all go through that. But if you're genuinely asking that question, it's indicative of the fact that maybe you don't know what you don't have. What you haven't, you don't know what what you haven't seen and what you haven't experienced.
Oh,
and so,
that's a good point.
What makes a relationship beautiful is not the absence of the hurting and the pain and the challenges. What makes it beautiful is being able to take the ability to take that garbage and literally turn it into life-giving compost that can create. I mean, when you think about it,
the growth,
when you think about how vegetables are garden, I mean, it's poop.
Yeah, yeah.
And I look at my mom's garden, and it's like broken up eggshells and like all the dirty stuff that we didn't want, and like all the leftover stuff, and it brings something so beautiful, and that is what makes a beautiful relationship, not this perfection where you never get in arguments or you never work through childhood trauma together. But it's being able to take the mess of that and have the skills and the ability, the emotional awareness to be able to take all that poop and turn it into fertilizer, into beautiful, life-giving food, a place for something beautiful to grow.
I love that.
Man, companionship is such an important part of human existence. Even if it's not a romantic relationship, just like the notion of loneliness. Why do we care about loneliness? Well, it's because we were made to be in community with other people.
We didn't say it in these words last episode, but you asked the question at the beginning, what does it look like for us what's that perfect relationship look like? And it is to love and to be fully loved and fully known, and to be able to do the same for somebody else. And so, that's what we were designed for.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, what's the ideal mindset that we should adopt when we enter into a romantic relationship? Like, is there a frame of mind that I should be walking into this to have the most efficient's a terrible word, the most effective relationship? Efficient, like it's a machine or something.
That's like a very guy thing to say.
I know. Terrible. Let's redo that. Rewind it back here.
I love that though.
But to some degree, I mean, it's like, hey, how can we make this thing work the best?
Absolutely.
Right? So maybe efficiency does work in some way, but
I mean, mindset. Yeah, what is that?
Right.
What is the mindset that we should be pursuing?
Yeah, a few things come to mind. Number one, we're talking about, you're ready to kind of pursue a relationship and go into that whole experience that takes lots of energy. It's well worth it. It takes lots of energy. A really great mindset to go into is to be thinking of a few things. Number one, I am not a mind reader.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is that any new relationship has to have lots of communication. And many times we go in just trying to guess how the other person is feeling and trying to guess everything that's going on, all the dynamics. But man, the beginning of a relationship necessitates so much communication. And if you have a question, you should just ask it. You shouldn't worry about, is this the right time to ask it? Oh, what will they think of me? I'm not a mind reader, so don't be afraid to ask lots of questions to build safety and trust. A second healthy mindset to have is that I am enough as I am. That goes back to the first episode. I know who I am. I am not entering this relationship for you to validate anything about me.
Oof.
Yeah.
I'm not entering this relationship for you to tell me my value, to help me feel something that I can't find in myself. And you have to feel pretty confident about that. The more confident you feel about that, man, the better, because you'll be entering into a relationship where you can just both be yourselves and there's nothing that you feel threatened by. If they don't like something about you, it's not because of you, because you won't be liked by someone else.
Yeah.
It's just a preference, right?
Yeah.
It's just compatibility. So that's number 2. I am enough as I am. My value is not tied to you. And number 3, a great mindset to have is I want to develop intimacy first through friendship, not necessarily through physical intimacy, especially here at the beginning. And again, I'm not going to go off and say all these things. These are the things you should and shouldn't do physically at this point. And then after this point, it's very, nuanced. But the thing with physical intimacy is that if you are genuinely trying to figure out, are we compatible? That will always blind you and make you kind of give you a false sense of intimacy.
Yes.
And you'll feel close, but then is it because you're touching each other
Right.
or is it because you actually are friends?
And there's also friends that you're friends with at stages of life. And so you have to figure out how to actually make that last longer. I mean, I think of time when I was in college, I was friends with other people who I was in college with, but now we rarely connect.
Right.
And it's because time and distance have separated us. But if we're going to pursue a romantic relationship, then you're talking about building that friendship on something that is solid, that can last longer as well.
Oh yeah, I look back on some of my relationships and I realized that I thought I would, and I could go into my relationships and tell you the things that I've learned through them, but I, number 1, didn't have a strong sense of self.
Okay.
And so that already blinded me.
Yeah.
I was already looking for them to fulfill something in me that I didn't have. But number 2, I would learn much later, 6, 7, 8 months into the relationship, that I felt close to them because we were holding hands and I'm physical touch. So that was, kind of clouding my vision when I realized I actually want to be able to be with someone where we don't have to touch each other to feel close. Like our friendship, and of course, there's nothing wrong with holding hands. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But make sure that you know what type of intimacy you're actually building that is going to last
Right.
long. So those 3 things, I think, to me, are
That
some of
is
the
so
most
good.
important.
That's good. So do you want to repeat those?
Yeah. So the first one is I am not a mind reader.
Okay.
Communication is key. Number 2, I am enough as I am. So my value is not tied to them. And number 3, I want to develop intimacy through friendship primarily versus just the physical aspect.
Yeah, that's
good. The last one, it's just like you want to touch emotionally, mentally, before you touch physically in that sense, And I think of it almost as these bar graphs, I guess, and one bar should always be leading the other.
Right.
The emotional, mental needs to be leading the pace.
Right.
And so if that is off pace, you can't increase the intimacy as well. And so that's one. And then I would add maybe another bar of commitment. If this is a very shallow commitment, I'm not going to open up to you all emotionally as well to that level, and definitely not physically. And yet in society, we've gone to the opposite level where it's like the physical leads the pack, and then I'll open up to you, and then we'll commit potentially more.
Or maybe not.
Or maybe not.
Yeah.
Right. Let's try this thing out. Let's see if we can live together and figure it out, But it's like, man, I remember reading this one study when I was doing work for grad school. People get more divorces after living together and they end up getting married than people who never did.
Right.
Because the whole idea of like, let's sequentially kind of increase this. Well, man, it might be just really backwards. The mental, emotional connections, friendship connections are so vital. And I think it's like gasoline on a fire, which is the physical intimacy. Yeah, it feels hot and beautiful and warm for the moment until the wood and gasoline is gone. It's like, well, what else is there? Oh, now it feels cold and hard to get through. Absolutely, because you never developed like a storehouse of just something meaningful and substantive.
So I'm going to throw a little curveball in here.
Good.
Because
Do it.
there are some people who, depending on their upbringing and how they were shown love, actually especially if they are not as in touch with their own emotions. This tends to be men, of course, gross generalization. It definitely can be women too. But sometimes, depending on the culture, depending on how your upbringing was, if you are not used to being shown affection through emotion and words and communication, the only way you really know how to show affection is through physical touch. And that can be difficult because you don't know how to receive and give love in different ways. But it's really important in the relationship to learn that, whether that's before the relationship or during, that no matter how you were raised, it's really important for one to come before the other.
I mean, the same goes for communication. We don't always witness great communication in our parents.
Right.
So you were just talking about commitment there, Philip. Let's talk about the purpose of marriage. What do you say the purpose of marriage is? And Philip, we would get you as a married man to comment on this too. But yeah, Ranela, what do you think the purpose of marriage is in the 21st century?
Yeah, I think there are many purposes of marriage, and I don't think it's one big thing. There are practical reasons, raising a family in a kind of a safe environment where they can learn and grow. Of course, companionship, lifelong companionship, to have someone there. There's something inside of each of us as humans that wants to have that one person that can we can share our lives with. Of course, having there's all the reasons for growth, and obviously spiritually, when you look at marriage, it's another picture of God that you get, character growth. But there are a lot of different purposes of marriage, but I think ultimately it does come down to friendship and companionship as you journey through life.
That's good.
I like that. Honestly, I think my understanding of this has really developed over the years. I think I initially started with one way, which I would probably say, which was just, I sensed God calling us to be together. And I would still stand behind that. I do not discredit that as being one of the primary reasons, I think, where we sensed, hey, let's really commit to this. I really sense God's calling in this. I really like this person. I really admire this person. I believe our values are similar, our goals, ambitions, and all that. But I think I've grown to realize that the purpose of marriage is also one of God's greatest shaping tools for me to become who He needs me to be in life.
I like that.
It is one of the most significant people who will make you into the best image of yourself if you allow the rub to occur, right? If you're one of those people where it's like oil and water and you just like run from the conflict, you run from the personal work that you need to bring to it, yeah, it's going to be a tough journey in marriage, and you're probably going to end up, unfortunately, in divorce because you just can't emotionally take it. But I think as Gary Thomas, Gary Thomas, he wrote Sacred Marriage, and it was just such a profound book, just recognizing that God designed marriage as a way for humanity to become more into the image of who He is, Christ Himself. But it really takes intentional effort on our part to be allowed to be shaped.
Yeah.
So I think marriage now, I'm recognizing more and more, it's like I don't need to fall into ego and defensiveness and like, oh, I wouldn't do that because I'm the man and she's the woman. It's like, what would God do? What would He want me to do? How does He want me to become more like Him through this experience together? So I think that's kind of been
that's good.
My space now.
I think Tim Keller, in the book we mentioned last week, The Meaning of Marriage, that he talks about some of those elements. And I mean, some people might disagree with this, but the idea of when you're getting married, you're also seeing the person God is turning that other spouse into. And so you also have to be okay with them never getting there, but it's also coming on board alongside God and partnering. So for you, partnering with God and helping Elena be who she is, and she partnering with God to help you reach your full potential.
Yeah. And that is so humbling. Oh my word. I'm just going to be very honest with both of you guys here. Can we just have a counseling session together?
Absolutely.
I have struggled for a long time with just the spirit of defensiveness when my faults are pointed out.
Right.
And I think there is this, talking about compensation, this feeling of just like, I just don't want to feel inferior
Yeah.
here. I just don't, I want to feel as though I'm strong
And capable. Yeah.
and that there is nothing within me that is going to cause any diminishment
Right.
of my value in any way. And so to admit to my fault here will indicate I'm just not that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. And so I'm not going to agree with you at all because I think you're completely wrong, you know?
Right.
But it's within those moments after she walks away, I walk away, you know, whether it's in peace or not, it's like, what in the world, you idiot?
Right.
You know? You kind of start thinking about it. But I think it's dangerous when we don't allow ourselves to really reflect on what the other person is saying, but you let ego reign and just rule, and having the self-talk in your head about who they are then. And, you know, so I think that's been one of the most beautiful things Elena's been helping me to do, is just like, hey, just deal with what we talked about. You don't have to get defensive. You don't have to work through anything else. Like, let's just, and then likewise, I can help her in that way too, and other things. But yeah, so I think that's a powerful thing, to be able to see what God might be wanting them to grow into, because that's kind of what you want them to grow into, you know, for health and the sake of your marriage. So
that's good. I love that, how you shared that about what the purpose of marriage is. It's emotional and spiritual development. And that's one of the best places to grow.
Okay, so there's there's a few other practical things that I want to almost throw out there just to come out with the taboos, because I think some people get this label and I think it's wrong. So it's like, you know, old curmudgeon, you know, couple looking at these young kids like, well, they just want to have sex. You know, that's why they got married. Hey, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
They do. And if you want to be God honoring and as a Christian, yes, that's okay.
Yep.
You know, I think that needs to be understood fairly. If you're going to be a believer, you know, having sex outside of that space is, you know, under God's order. There's a reason why we don't do that.
We're getting to that in another episode.
Yeah, and I'm excited about that one. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. Being one of the reasons, obviously not the reason, but hey, that's great.
Right.
You know, Paul gives us that counsel. You're burning with desire. Get married, buddy. You know, and in our age, if you don't, you will unfortunately fall into temptation. It's inevitable. You're getting into your 30s and later. You know, the rate of having sex outside of marriage just continues to increase, and it's just there, which is, you know, hey, it happens. We can work through it. We can talk about what do you do when you feel just that shame. Okay, that's a whole nother story. But I think we need to allow people to have the opportunity to get married, and that being one of the reasons, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a human need.
Yes.
And so we can't demonize a human need. The way that God created us is to have sexual needs.
Yes.
And absolutely, that's a great point.
But the thing is, hey, you're going to grow in that for the rest of your life together.
Right.
That's also a cool thing about marriage. Talk about the purpose of marriage. It's also sexual development as a couple, and how that also builds the spiritual and emotional development. And that's what also can be a great tool to tie you together.
Yeah.
But I think that apart from not having great communication, it's not going to hold you together.
Yeah.
You know, great sex won't heal your marriage. The same thing with kids and all these things. Like, okay, it's there, but it does absolutely help in a marriage. And it might foster more intimacy and willingness to be vulnerable, apologetic, and all these things. So.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that, especially in more of a Christian context, so many times it's so taboo, and then people end up feeling bad that that's like one of the reasons they want to get married.
Yeah.
But it's a very real need, and it's healthy.
Yeah.
Are you single with nowhere to mingle? If you've been enjoying our conversations on relationships this season, and you're ready to pursue your own healthy and overflowing relationship, I want to introduce you to my friends at thelovepotluck.com. They run virtual speed dating for Seventh-day Adventist singles, and they're an Adventist dating platform that lets you have live face-to-face conversations with real people who share your values. You'll get to meet several individuals who are in your age range for less than what you'd pay for just one usual date. and their hosts take the awkwardness out of it, so you're sure to have a fun time. You can learn more or register at thelovepotluck.com. And for what it's worth, when I was helping my friends set this all up, it's actually where I met my girlfriend for the first time. So you never know who you might meet. Because let's face it, you're more likely to meet someone when you actually meet more people. So go ahead, sign up for their next event at thelovepotluck.com. So let's talk about what to look out for in a relationship. What are some basic principles to guide us when we're meeting potential romantic partners? What are we paying attention to? What then we can get into some red flags in a moment. But what are the good things we're looking out for?
Yeah, so we as humans are attracted to people typically in 5 ways: physically,
Okay.
materially, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. It's easy to be attracted to almost anyone through the first 3: physical, material, intellectual.
Yeah.
Oh, he's really hot. Like, oh, whoa, he caught my eye. I love the way that her mind works. She's funny. Or, materially, oh my
He'll
gosh.
be able to provide for
oh,
you and
yeah,
everything you've ever wanted.
He's loaded, And so it's easy to be attracted in those ways. But the ones that actually matter long-term are emotionally and spiritually, right? And going back to the whole idea of, and I'm always going to go back to this idea of, you need to know who you are. So before you go out to, try to figure out who should I be with, of those 5 things, the last 2 matter no matter what.
Yeah.
Emotionally and spiritually, like I said, whether you're spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual or not, even if that your level of lack of spirituality, you need to look out for compatibility in that area too. So the last 2 are really important. Of the first 3, which ones matter to you most? Maybe physical isn't as important for some people. For some people, material isn't that important. So you need to know, do all 5 of those matter to you? Or maybe only 3 of the 5, maybe 4 out of 5, maybe all 5. And so as you're meeting people, it is important to kind of establish for yourself what matters to you most. And then when you're meeting people, to say okay, I really liked the physical and the intellectual part, but I didn't really love the spiritual part. Or, oh, I really loved emotional and spiritual part. They have those important things, but I'm not really attracted to them intellectually. And so you have to figure out what matters to you and be able to kind of filter through that.
And rate them almost as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh, that's good.
I find that sometimes I wonder if the list should be just thrown out. People talk about, oh, you better have your list. You better have what you really think you want and need. And, you think of some of the Bible characters and you're like, dude, these people did not have a list, let alone a list. They were put with a list that's in the negative, the things they would never want. Hosea and Gomer. Go marry a prostitute and go find her again after she leaves you and finds the other lovers again. Or just other stories. I'm just oh man.
I mean, just in my own experience, in the last few years, hearing of a friend whose wife left him in a brutal way, but the reason being was the emotional and spiritual part, more so the spiritual part, I think. And so at that point, I was thinking about still looking for who I was going to marry one day. But the idea being that I was okay, I'm done with the list.
Yeah. Because
I realized, okay, let's take everything off the table and start again, and spiritual and emotional things come first.
Right.
Because this couple, they were able to have fun and do life together, and it seemed like on Instagram they were having a great marriage. But in the behind the scenes, behind closed doors, they weren't compatible spiritually.
Right.
And she walked out because he loved Jesus more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I look back on my journal entries from years ago and all the list of things that I was looking for.
Yeah.
It's so shallow. It's
right.
He needs to, I don't even want to say some of those things.
I want to hear them.
I was so different back then too. So they're kind of lame. One of them was I really wanted him to be a gardener. And now I'm who cares?
Oh,
but I think
gardeners are cool.
Yeah, for sure. No, but like taking the list of more of the preferences, and those
Yeah.
are great, but at the end of the day, like what really matters is kind of that shortened, condensed list. I mean, one way that you could really throw out the list is, how does this person make me feel? Because there are certain ways that you can know, and that also ties into the emotional part.
Right.
But how do they make me feel? Obviously, that could be taken in different ways. Like, oh, I feel so excited when I'm with them. And, I just love and it can be a shallow way. But also, I have met so many people, especially, women, because I tend to talk to a lot of women who, they hate the way that the person makes them feel when they share vulnerably or when they share what they need. They're maybe gaslit, or they're made to feel like, oh, you're being too dramatic.
Gaslit. Let's define that for our listeners.
Gaslighting. It's if I were to share with you something that I feel like I needed, and you were to just make it no big deal. It's like, oh, well, don't worry about it. It's only because of this. It's oh yeah, it's not a big deal. And you're basically telling me, invalidating how I feel. And so how does that person make you feel emotionally when you're vulnerable with them, or, when you're having issues? When you handle conflict and challenges, how does that person make you feel through it? If you feel invalidated, gaslit, if you feel, like you're always the crazy one. I mean, those are types of ways too that you can just kind of be self-aware about that person, and if it's someone that you feel safe with even. So, I mean, those types of things are so much deeper than, is he a gardener?
Right.
I think maybe I would use a different word than list. I would say what you brought up are core values.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Core values that are essential to success in a marriage and a relationship in general. And then maybe what we're talking about normally, what we normally think of are priorities. Or preferences, rather. Preferences and these lists of preferences. But
and they're going to fall into one of those 5 different things that you talked about at the top, the physical and the material, etc., right?
Yeah.
So and you could almost categorize, and then you realize, oh, all my priorities fall in the material category, and then that might be a red flag.
I wonder if it's okay if I don't necessarily find this person attractive. That's something that working with someone about, it's just like, man, they have everything, this, but there just doesn't seem to be any chemistry here. But in every way, I feel like they'd make the perfect spouse, and it's like, I
have thoughts.
Okay.
Tell us.
I think that chemistry can be developed. I think that attraction can be developed. But after a certain point, if it is not developed, I think it's absolutely okay to say, you're a great person, but I am keeping you from someone who's going to love the whole package. There is someone out there that's going to find everything about you incredibly attractive. And like, he gives me the butterflies, and I'm holding you back from that person. There's nothing wrong. You shouldn't say, oh, I'm not going to go on a date with you because I'm not physically attracted to you. I mean, unless that really, really matters to you. Again, you have to know yourself. If you know that if you're not physically attracted, there's some people where they view beauty in certain ways, and it's just like they know that was really important. It's okay to stick to that value and not feel vain. But I think it is important, if they have so many great values, to give them a chance to see if anything can develop. But I wouldn't ever encourage anyone to pursue a long-term relationship out of principle.
What do you mean by that? Define that a little bit more.
Out of the mere principle of, they're a good person, they have a good character, they're going to provide for me. I mean, can you imagine? You have to at least be attracted to their personality. You like being around them. You feel proud to be around them. There has to be some element of that. And I think it's easy to downplay that because we're trying to grasp, when we say like, oh, well, long term, he'll take care of you. That's not how humans work, though. I wish it was. I wish we were a little bit more principled and robotic in that way. But I actually think that God put within us creativity and, and certain preferences. And I think that at a level that's okay.
That is profound to mention, because I think there are some marriages that occur because of principle and family pressures. Oh, this would be a good match for you, And Okay, now tell me this. You're Indian, right?
Yes.
Let's just talk about it for a moment.
Yeah.
I mean, they seem to be
Right.
arranged marriage still going on. You said that earlier in the previous episode. And there's happiness there.
Yeah.
And it's out of principle,
Right.
right? I mean, I guess, is it just different because we're in a different culture and so love marriages have to have different principles and values? Or, I mean,
I think it's a couple of things.
okay.
Number one, it is the culture, the expectation. So if you take Carl and you're like, hey, I found a girl for you, everything within him would be like, I want to choose who I'm with, right? I mean, in their culture, they want it to happen. They are expecting that. They grow up with that expectation. So it's a mindset for sure.
Okay.
But also, not in many families, the parents do really know their kids really well. And they are always trying to find someone who fits certain things and who is physical, material, will take care of them, but also will fit actually with the temperament of their child.
Okay.
So there is some of that, but it's more so the parent doing it than the child. I am very American. I would not be okay with that at all. But yeah, so I think it's a couple of those things. But because it's our culture, that
makes sense. Actually, that makes sense. You have to have a completely different mindset to be ready for that. Yeah.
That's good.
But I feel kind of strongly about this.
Okay.
That you should really be not just physical. I'm not just talking about physical. You should be attracted to who that person is.
Right.
That is the human part. We can't just say these are good
attracted
reasons.
to the soul in a way, like everything.
Yeah, because I know a lot of girls who they'll date guys who they didn't find that attractive at first, but they became more and more attractive. And now they're just like, man, isn't he the hottest guy around? And beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and that's wonderful. So if it can develop, that's great. But at some point, if you have to be honest with yourself and just know, like, okay, I need to allow them to be with someone who's going to be really head over heels for them.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. Okay, let's talk deal breakers. Let's talk red flags.
Ooh.
What should we be on the lookout for?
Yeah. Man. Again, I always come back to this, and it's a lack of self-awareness.
So looking out for that in the other person.
Right. Obviously in yourself, but also their level of emotional intelligence, how they treat people, how they treat humans, how they treat you when you bring up something that bothers you, when you have conflict, especially when you have conflict. How do you feel? How do they handle it? How do you handle it? Do you resolve it? Not that it has to be perfect in the moment, but can they resolve it afterwards? Do they apologize? Do they, kind of take ownership of the things they need to take ownership? Again, no one's perfect, but for the majority, I dated one person once where I felt every time I shared something, it was, I always felt invalidated. And the way that he would respond is he would kind of put up a wall, and then I wouldn't hear from him for like a couple of days because he was processing. So it was his way of processing. But for me, speaking of attachment, I'm a vacillator. Yeah, he's an avoider. I was a vacillator, anxious attachment. And so I didn't like how that was making my nervous system feel. And then I would bring that up, but he would still get defensive. So it was like we couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
So stuff like that, like, can we actually be adults and talk about what's bothering us and resolve it in some form? Or am I constantly feeling, like I'm being invalidated? When you're vulnerable, how do they take it? Do you feel safe with them in general? If you don't feel safe with them physically, emotionally, I would say that's a deal breaker. Especially if you've tried to talk through it and you've actually brought it up. Of course, you can, if you haven't brought it up, you got to talk about it. But I want to bring something up that you'll probably bring up in future episodes. But when you talk about red flags and deal breakers, one thing that some people think about and ask is pornography a deal breaker? It can be, but it can also not be, actually.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that.
I agree with that.
Yeah, because I think, to me, my standard for whoever I date is, where are they on that journey?
Right.
Because I don't come with the assumption that you've never looked at porn. I mean, if you've never looked at porn, I really don't know what planet you live on, because it's so accessible.
Oh, yeah.
And especially a lot of guys and girls that are addicted tend to have been exposed when they were really young and didn't know what their emotional capacity to deal with that was undeveloped.
Especially nowadays.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to find. So, so even when it comes to pornography, and I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that, but I've met and talked to a lot of girls where when they hear that a guy, you know, has looked at porn or had some type of deal with it, or maybe is still dealing with it, they're like, they freak out and they're like, oh, I got to cut it off. And man, he's, you know, and I'm like, don't demonize him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've had those instances with others in counseling sessions where it's exactly what the woman did, and she wanted a divorce.
Right.
A divorce.
Wow.
Like it's over. And it's tough because, okay, I'm a guy. There have been seasons in my life as a younger guy in particular where I struggled with that, right? And that was something I really prayed that God would give me victory over. And it's been beautifully, thankfully, in that sense, like victorious. But there are seasons when for a man, it may come up in a marriage.
Right.
Or they never dealt with it earlier on in life and they bring that into the marriage. And it's painful for that person. There's shame and guilt associated with this. This isn't like necessarily always, oh, I just really want to do this more than I ever want to have sex with you or be intimate with you. But it's like, man, there's really a pathway that's been built here biochemically that they need to get help for.
Right.
And I think that isn't something like you're saying, like go shame them more for that. No. There can be help for this. Now, like you said, I think it doesn't mean it has to. But I have also met people who not only do they not want help, they don't think it's a bad thing, and they think it's okay. And that's where I think it's completely wrong. And I think that's grounds for actually like they're in adultery at that point where it's like, no, this isn't bad. You know, this is part of it. This is just journey. Like, just deal with it. It's fine. You know, no, that's not okay.
Yeah.
You're inviting someone else into your marriage, absolutely, by doing that. And whether you know the person or you don't, you know, so I think that's important. Is there a trajectory, like you said, of growth in that? And there needs to be some hard work with this.
Yeah.
I also want us to speak to the women who take it so lightly. Because I've also met those too. Well, you know, whatever. You know, he does it. No. You cannot allow that type of mentality in your attitude too, because that harbors a very, very negative pathway for both of you. So both ends need help too.
Yeah. And I bring that up because I've just heard it so much. And it's always been this question, should I break up with him?
Yeah.
And I just say you need to find out more and you need to understand.
He needs to, if he's on a journey, like if he admits that it's an addiction and he wants help, then like you said, maybe there's hope. Hope for a better future where he can be managing and free from it.
Right. And where is he at on that journey? How much accountability has he gotten? What has he put into it?
Right.
If he's apathetic, that's a deal breaker.
Right.
That's a red flag for me. I'm like, no, I'm not getting into that mess.
No.
But if it's something where he's working on it, you also have to decide if you're willing to be on that journey with them, because the last thing they need is for the person they deeply love to be shaming them for something that they're actively trying to get out of that is a genuine struggle. And so you almost in that area, you do have to, that's a process to understand. Maybe I think for a lot of women, because we don't talk about these things, we don't talk about pornography. And for a lot of women, especially women in the church, they are actually very clueless about just the workings of it. And like, you know, they feel that this is all about, they feel obviously deeply hurt because it's like, oh, you want to see someone else instead of me. And sometimes it's like you said, it's more of a chemical thing. It's more of a, you know, it's a habit. It's an addiction that needs to be resolved. And anyway, I do think that that's an important topic to discuss at a certain point.
I think in another episode, maybe in a different season, we'll talk about dysfunctions and addictions in that regard. I think that would be a really important one to go into deeper. Yeah. No, thank you for bringing that up. And any other red flags that you would say people should consider?
Yeah, it's mainly as it has to do with values. The number one predictor of divorce is any major doubt before marriage. And so
Hmm.
if you have any doubts about their values, that's really important. I would say there's another interesting thing. If you just really hate hanging out with their friends, I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker, but who they hang out with and the types of people that they're with and their values. Those two things are going to give you a little clue into what your life is going to be like.
Yeah.
So not that you have to love their friends and be best friends with them, but are you like super annoyed with them, or are you just, you don't get them, you don't get, you don't like being around them?
Right.
Maybe there's something that you're not understanding about the person you're with either, because they really enjoy it. So anyway, that's just a kind of a random one, but one that has been shown to kind of show how much you really are going to enjoy actually being with that person.
That's a good point.
So are you saying this study was talking about doubt being like doubt period, or doubting in the values of who they are? What maybe define
doubt period.
Really?
Right. So
Yeah.
there's obviously nervousness because it's an unknown path.
That's the thing. I think everybody's kind of
I'm committing to this person for life. But do you have any doubt about them? That you're going to spend the rest of your life with them? You should feel safe. You should feel at ease, and that they'll take care of you. You'll take care of them. And whatever storm comes, you'll be able to weather it together. You shouldn't have any doubt about that. But yeah, number one predictor of divorce is doubt.
Wow.
Doubt before marriage.
Wow. That's good. Is there an unhealthy sense of doubt? And then, okay, this is an appropriate sense of doubt, because this is a big one. People wonder, like, oh, am I ready? Is she ready? Is this ready?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Like, are we going to get divorced? Like, oh my goodness,
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. Marriage is like a white coat ceremony, right? It's not a graduation. It's the beginning. So you are going to there's going to be unknowns. There are so many unknowns. But the work that you have done in answering the questions, I mean, we didn't even get into this, but is there relational safety in this relationship? I feel very safe with them. I feel that they, won't do me wrong. I won't do them wrong. If I need to come to them in a vulnerable way, they will handle it carefully. They're not going to make me feel terrible. So there's that relational safety, the emotional intimacy. Are we friends? Can we just hang out? We like being around each other. We enjoy each other's lifestyle. I can see that day in and day out of being together is not going to be a drag all the time. Obviously, there's just the mundane life that we go through day to day, but I like their lifestyle, I like their energy, I like their temperament, and I enjoy being with them. There's that emotional intimacy. Then there's commitment. You have no doubt that they are someone that understands the work that marriage takes. As much as possible, they understand that they're going to have to work through things, and that this is a long-term binding thing. This is not just something we can throw away and find someone new whenever we want. We're really committed to this. And number 4, the physical passion. I have no doubts that they are willing to fulfill those needs that I have, and that I'm willing to fulfill those needs. And we want to. We are, obviously, if we're choosing to be to not engage in sex before marriage, we're putting in those boundaries, but we really want to. There's a good, healthy amount of physical passion. So if you don't feel doubt about those areas, and you just feel settled with who they are and the fact that you're going to live with them the rest of your life, like, those are the things that are like, okay, you feel settled in it. Again, there's the fear of the unknown.
Sure.
There's the fear, but it should not be fear about their character and their values.
Yeah.
I think the idea of, you asked about healthy amount of doubt, I think I see that being part of the dating process of working that out and getting to the point where you're like, I have no doubt that she is, or that he is, the one that I'm going to really enjoy all those elements you just mentioned.
Right.
And then you can say, let's do this.
Like I said, it's a white coat ceremony. That's not when you graduate. That's when you're actually beginning your medical program. That's the ceremony that kind of starts it all. And that's a celebration of it, but it's not the end. You're just at the beginning. Graduation, obviously, is, you're done with the program, years away. And even then, there's so much learning and growth that happens. And so, this is when you're getting married, it's just the beginning. And there is going to be a healthy sense of, a little bit of nervousness and fear, but you should not have any doubt about who that person is, their character, their values, and the fact that that's the person that you want to go through the challenges of life with.
That's good.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thanks so much, Ranela, for those ideas. Have you got any questions or something we should be thinking about on a personal level this week?
Oh man, when it comes to just what you're looking for and being prepared, I think, again, I just, the key to the mantra of my life and the key to everything has just continued to be building your own sense of self. Don't come to a relationship hoping to find something else where you have so many broken pieces that are unresolved. Do as much work as you can on yourself so that when you come into a relationship, you can come with a clear sense of what you're looking for and what matters to you, and be able to make decisions, major decisions, based off of principle and not based off of insecurity.
Love that. Love that. Now, again, you mentioned last week, but for those who didn't catch last week's episode, how can we connect with you? What's a good way to maybe ask more questions or join one of your life coaching, mental health coaching groups?
Yeah, I'm super active in my DMs on Instagram. So I'm at Life with Ranela. And please feel free to send me questions or anything. Just follow the content. I also have all the links in my bio there to figure out how to work with me. I do one-on-one drop-in sessions, and I also do a full-on 8-week program where we really dive into this idea of self-awareness, building our identity and values and purpose, cleaning up our mental mess, improving our mental hygiene, and we talk about relationships and faith too. So
that sounds good. Yeah. And you do group sessions too. What's a group one compared to a one-on-one?
So in the group sessions, it depends. Every month is different as far as the topic. But the one-on-one 8-week program, we go through several different topics. For these group sessions, we focus on one topic the whole month. Okay.
And in any resources additionally from last week's episode, there was good books you mentioned there. Have you got any extra for this type of topic at all?
Man, no, I think those are the main ones. I love the ones that you shared too, the meaning of marriage.
Repeat those again. I think they were just so good.
Yeah, How We Love. That one is on attachment theory. Man, attachment theory is a great place to start for building self-awareness. It's a really great place to start. Relationship Goals by Pastor Michael Todd. And Emotional Intimacy 101 by Dr. Pierre Steenberg, who has made an incredible difference in my own understanding of relationships. He's someone I go to for relationship therapy. 5 Love Languages, 5 Languages of Apology. It's also called When Sorry Isn't Enough. So good.
I think I've seen the cover of that one on Amazon somewhere.
Yeah, that one's really good. And then a couple of other ones, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess by Dr. Carolyn Leaf. Again, that one is a great one for building self-awareness, emotional management, both for men and for women. I mean, learning how to neurocycle through triggers that come up. Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. That one's an incredible, just wisdom-filled book. And then one that I mentioned last time that I am going to jump into is Man Enough by Justin Baldoni. And that's kind of looking at the heart of redefining masculinity. And again, I think it's really great for women to understand that as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, those links will be in the show notes. Again, thank you so much, Ranela, for this conversation. It's been really helpful.
Absolutely.
And if you have enjoyed this podcast, we can't encourage you enough to share an episode or two or many and give us a like on any platform that you're at. Put a great review. We always appreciate those. But let me leave you with a blessing as we always do. Amazing God, fill everyone here today with just a sense of overwhelming love from you. May they know that they are not only loved right now in the state that they're in, whether it's in a brokenness, but even when they make mistakes. And God, I thank you for your mercy, which is so good. Lord, I pray that each one of us would be such people that we would love deeply in the midst of the messes, and that we would evaluate our relationships based on the principles you've created in Scripture and also in these great practical ways we've explored today. Give us hope that things will get better, and give us purpose in our relationships today. In your name we pray. Amen. And as we always say, choose today to overflow.